This is a true story, something that happened to me a few years ago. It's strange how a single, cruel sentence can change the entire course of your life, but it can. The champagne flute felt cold and alien in my hand, a stark contrast to the heat rising in my cheeks. We were gathered on the rooftop of Celeste in Chicago, the city lights a glittering, indifferent tapestry below, celebrating my promotion to project manager. Then Isabella's voice, sharp and coated in expensive Chardonnay, cut through the celebratory noise. "Don't let it go to your head, Mia," she said, loud enough for our entire team to hear, a venomous smile playing on her lips. "Everyone knows this was a pity promotion. They just felt sorry for you after your mom. If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel, tell us where you're from, and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows." The rooftop chatter didn't so much die as it did curdle. Colleagues who had been congratulating me moments before now found fascinating points of interest on their shoes or in the distant glow of the Hancock Tower. My boss, David, gave a tight, uncomfortable cough and busied himself with a tray of bacon-wrapped dates. The moment stretched into a thin, brittle silence, and in that silence, my greatest professional achievement was incinerated, replaced by the ashes of humiliation and the ghost of my mother. Isabella's words hung in the air, a poison gas cloud of an accusation. I was not capable, not worthy. I was just a charity case, an object of pity, and my recent grief was now a public tool used to question my competence. I looked at Isabella, her eyes gleaming with a triumphant cruelty that I had never truly seen before. She had just redefined my success as a weakness, and as I stood there, speechless and shaking, a cold, hard certainty began to crystallize in the pit of my stomach. This was not just an insult. It was a declaration of war. I didn't know how, and I didn't know when, but I knew I would not just survive this. I would win. The ride home in the Uber was a blur of neon streaks and hollow silence. The congratulations, the clinking glasses, the proud handshake from David, it had all been overwritten by a single, brutal piece of code. Pity promotion. The words echoed in the rhythmic swish of the windshield wipers as a light rain began to fall over the city. I lived in a small one-bedroom in Lincoln Park, a place my mom had helped me pick out. Walking into it that night felt like walking into a museum of a life that was no longer mine. The promotion was supposed to be a light, a step forward out of the suffocating fog of the last 6 months. Mom had been sick for a year, and her passing had hollowed out a part of my world I didn't know could be empty. Work had been my refuge. I'd poured every ounce of my focus into the Sinclair account, working late, triple-checking every data point, building the market entry strategy from the ground up. I thought my work had spoken for itself, but Isabella had given it a new voice, a sick, wheedling voice that whispered of weakness. Was it true? The question was a venomous little worm, burrowing into my brain. Had David and the partners sat in a boardroom, looked at my metrics, my successful campaign pitches, my flawless execution reports, and decided the deciding factor was my personal tragedy? It felt absurd, but Isabella's confidence had been so absolute, her delivery so surgical. She planted the seed of doubt not just in my colleagues' minds, but in my own. I replayed the last few months. David had been more gentle with me, yes. He'd told me to take all the time I needed after the funeral, that my role was secure. I had seen it as kindness, as basic human decency. Now, I was forced to re-examine it through Isabella's twisted lens. Was it decency or was it condescension? For the next week, the office was a minefield of awkward glances and forced smiles. People treated me like fragile glass. My new team, the one I was supposed to lead, was hesitant, their interactions laced with a kind of careful sympathy that felt more insulting than outright hostility. They saw me not as their new manager, but as the pity promotion. Isabella, meanwhile, was a master of plausible deniability. She came to my new office, a small, glass-walled space that now felt more like a fishbowl, the next morning with a bright, fake apology. "Mia, I am so sorry about last night," she'd said, her voice dripping with mock sincerity. "I had way too much to drink and was just devastated about not getting the promotion." I was lashing out. It was horrible of me. It was a perfect performance. She'd already reframed her attack as a moment of drunken weakness, making herself the victim of her own emotions. To call her out on the deliberate cruelty of it would make me look petty and unable to accept an apology. I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak, and accepted. But I didn't believe her. Not for a second. The suspicion, once planted, began to grow roots. I started watching her, really watching her. I saw the way she'd laugh a little too loudly at David's terrible jokes. The way she'd volunteer for high visibility, low effort tasks, like presenting the intro slides at a client meeting, then pass off the actual grueling research work to junior analysts. She was a master of managing perceptions. Her own work product, when I looked at it with newly critical eyes, was fine. It was adequate. It met the brief, but it never exceeded it. It was lazy, often padded with buzzwords and recycled concepts from older projects. Her reputation, I realized, wasn't built on substance, but on social engineering. And I had been one of her projects. The first concrete clue came 2 weeks later. I was trying to locate a file from the Sinclair project, a raw data set I needed for a quarterly review. I remembered saving it on the shared server under a specific subfolder, but it was gone. I spent an hour searching before giving up and deciding to pull the data again from the source. It was annoying, but I chalked it up to a server glitch or my own mistake. The following week, a similar thing happened. An email from a client with crucial feedback, which I had been waiting for, never arrived. I only found out about it when the client called, asking why I hadn't made the requested changes. I searched my inbox, my spam, my archives, nothing. I had to apologize profusely and ask him to resend it. He forwarded the original thread and my blood ran cold. He had sent it on time. But he'd sent it to Isabella, who was also on the project team, and she had never forwarded it to me. When I confronted her, she gave me a wide-eyed, innocent look. "Oh my God, Mia, I am so sorry. It must have gotten buried. You know how my inbox is. I'm just so swamped." It was another perfect excuse. A single incident was explainable. Two started to feel like a pattern. The missing file, the buried email. They were small things, but they both had the effect of making me look disorganized and inefficient. She wasn't just insulting me. She was actively, if subtly, sabotaging me. She was trying to create the very reality she'd accused me of benefiting from, a reality where I was, in fact, incompetent. And the most terrifying part was, it was starting to work. David called me into his office at the end of that week. "Mia," he said, his expression one of paternal concern, "is everything all right? I know you've been under a lot of stress. There have been a couple of minor slip-ups lately. I need to know you're 100% on top of your new responsibilities." His words were gentle, but the implication was clear. Isabella's poison was seeping into the foundations of my career, and I realized this fight was not going to be won by defending myself. I had to go on the attack. But how do you fight a ghost? How do you prove that a series of unfortunate accidents is actually a calculated campaign of professional destruction? I left his office that day not with fear, but with a terrifying clarity. Isabella had shown me the game she was playing. Now I had to learn the rules and play it better than she ever could. That night I didn't go home. I went back to my office, the glass fishbowl, and I started digging. I wasn't just looking for proof of what she'd done. I was looking for a weapon, and I had a horrible feeling I knew exactly where to find it. I opened the shared server, my heart pounding a steady, rhythmic drumbeat of anger against my ribs, and navigated to a project folder from 6 months ago. A project Isabella and I had worked on together, right around the time my mother's health took a turn for the worse. That's when I saw it. A folder hidden deep in the directory labeled Archive Drafts ER, IR Isabella Rossi. And inside that folder, my blood turned to ice. It wasn't just one of my files. It was dozens of them. My work, my reports, my presentations, all saved in duplicate, but with one crucial, damning difference. Each of her versions was subtly altered, filled with tiny, well-hidden errors. It was her ammunition cache, a secret arsenal of my own work, weaponized and waiting to be used against me. And in the date-modified column, I could see a clear pattern. Every time I had confided in her, told her I was having a hard day or needed to leave early for a hospital visit, a new file would appear in her hidden folder within the hour. She hadn't just been a coworker, she had been a predator, waiting for me to bleed. The discovery of the hidden folder was a fulcrum point. The grief that had clouded my thoughts for months, the humiliation from the party, the anxiety from David's warning, it all burned away, leaving behind a cold, crystalline anger. This wasn't just office politics. This was a deep and personal betrayal. Isabella hadn't just kicked me when I was down. She had been meticulously documenting my pain to engineer my failure. She had used my vulnerability as a weapon against me, all while smiling to my face and offering meaningless condolences. Sitting there in the sterile blue light of my monitor, I saw the full picture. The pity promotion line wasn't just a drunken insult. It was the cornerstone of her entire narrative. She had spent months carefully curating an image of me as the fragile, grief-stricken employee who couldn't handle the pressure. She'd laid the groundwork with David, whispering words of concern, all so that when I finally got the promotion she coveted, she could deploy her final devastating attack, making everyone believe I hadn't earned it. She was trying to gaslight the entire office, and me along with them. My first instinct was to storm into David's office the next morning, laptop in hand, and expose everything. To show him the hidden folder, the duplicate files with their timestamps, the calculated cruelty of it all. But I stopped myself. I played it out in my head. I'd look hysterical, vengeful. Isabella, the master of social manipulation, would twist it. She'd claim I hacked her folders, that I was paranoid from stress. She'd cry. She'd make herself the victim of my unstable grief. Given the narrative she had already built with David, who would he believe? The charming concerned friend or the recently bereaved woman with a folder full of conspiracy theories? It was her word against mine, and she had made sure her word was worth more. No, a direct confrontation was a battle on her terms. I needed to fight it on mine. My battleground wasn't drama and accusations. It was data, process, and execution. I wouldn't just prove her wrong. I would methodically, professionally, and quietly dismantle the very foundation of her career at Vantage Point. I wouldn't just clear my name. I would make her my subordinate. The title of the story that had brought me here in the first place echoed in my head, but it wasn't a title anymore. It was a promise. I became her manager 3 months later. I now had a deadline. The very next day, I began what I internally called the Isabella Project. My strategy had 3 phases. Phase 1, observation and documentation. I needed to build a case so airtight and objective that it couldn't be dismissed as a personal vendetta. I created a private encrypted log on my personal hard drive. In it, I documented every single interaction with Isabella. Every snide comment in a meeting with date, time, and witnesses. Every task she was assigned and its actual completion date versus the deadline. Every time she forgot to include someone on an important email chain. I used my new managerial permissions to access project management dashboards, tracking her metrics with an obsessive focus. Her billable hours, her client feedback scores, her revision requests. I compiled it all into spreadsheets and charts. I wasn't looking for one big smoking gun. I was building a portrait of incompetence, death by 1,000 paper cuts, all backed by undeniable, unemotional data. Isabella, oblivious, continued her campaign of micro-sabotage. She'd accidentally delete a shared calendar invite for a crucial team meeting I was supposed to lead. She'd talk over me in brainstorming sessions, then repitch my own idea 5 minutes later as if it were hers. And I did nothing. I didn't react. I didn't argue. I simply smiled, nodded, and made another entry in my log. My passivity seemed to embolden her. She grew sloppy, confident that I was the broken, fragile creature she believed me to be. This was her fatal mistake. She saw my silence as weakness. In reality, it was the coiled silence of a predator. While she was playing checkers, I was learning to play chess. Phase 2 began a month later, alliance and entrapment. Vantage Point landed a massive new client, the Sovereign, a chain of ultra-luxury boutique hotels opening their first U.S. location in Chicago. It was the biggest account we'd landed in years, a career maker for whoever helmed it. The entire office was buzzing, and no one was buzzing louder than Isabella. This was her kind of project, glamorous, high-profile, and heavy on schmoozing. She immediately started positioning herself for it, brown-nosing David, name-dropping her supposed connections in the hospitality industry. I knew she wanted it more than anything, and I was going to give it to her. In the next management meeting, when David asked for team lead suggestions for the Sovereign account, I did the last thing anyone expected. I think Isabella would be a great fit to lead the initial client-facing strategy, I said, my voice even and professional. The room went silent. David looked stunned. Isabella, who was also in the meeting, shot me a look of pure, unadulterated suspicion. I continued. Her strength is in client relations and big-picture ideation. She's the perfect person to handle their initial vision casting. Then I delivered the checkmate move. I would be happy to oversee the project from a managerial level, handling the data integration and back-end analytics to support her team. That way, David, you can be sure the logistical execution is rock solid. It was a brilliant move, if I did say so myself. It made me look like a magnanimous, collaborative leader who was rising above petty competition. It boxed David in. How could he say no? And it put Isabella exactly where I wanted her. I handed her a shovel and pointed her toward a plot of land I knew was filled with clay. I helped build her team, but I made sure the core of it was built on her weaknesses. I assigned her the most complex, detail-oriented parts of the project: the multi-channel budget allocation, the supply chain data analysis, and the demographic deep dive. These were the unglamorous, numbers-heavy tasks that required meticulous, painstaking work, the very kind of work my documentation proved she always avoided or did poorly. I was giving her enough rope to hang herself, and to make sure I had a witness, I assigned a brilliant but overlooked junior analyst, Kevin, to her team. Kevin was hungry, smart, and fiercely loyal. Isabella had always been dismissive of him, treating him like her personal coffee runner. I had spent the last month mentoring him, recognizing his talents and earning his trust. Now he was my inside man. His job was simple: do his work perfectly and keep a log of every shortcut Isabella took. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was wait for her to walk into it. Phase 2 unfolded exactly as I had predicted. Isabella, thrilled at being the face of the prestigious Sovereign account, dove headfirst into the glamorous parts of the job. She organized lavish client dinners at Gibson's Bar and Steakhouse, spent days picking out fonts and color palettes for presentation decks, and basked in the glow of the client's initial excitement. But she completely neglected the foundational work I had assigned her. The complex budget spreadsheets were full of placeholder numbers. The demographic analysis was a superficial summary lifted from a generic industry report. She delegated the real work to the most junior members of her team with vague instructions, expecting them to build a skyscraper on a foundation of sand. My inside man Kevin was a godsend. He'd discreetly message me every time Isabella would say, "Just make the numbers work," or "Don't worry about the source data. The clients will never check that." Kevin, following my instructions, would do the work correctly himself, saving both versions: Isabella's sloppy, corner-cutting directive and his own meticulously researched data. He was building my second, corroborating arsenal. Meanwhile, I played the part of the supportive overseer. In our weekly check-ins with David, I would present a united front. Isabella is doing a fantastic job managing the client relationship, I'd say, which was true. The creative direction is really exciting. I was giving her the credit she craved, lulling her into a deeper sense of security. Behind the scenes, however, I was running my own shadow project. Every evening, after Isabella and her team had left, I would go through their work. I'd take her flawed datasets and, using Kevin's correct numbers, build a parallel, accurate version of the entire project strategy. The correct budget, the real demographic projections, the viable market penetration timelines. It was an exhausting, soul-crushing amount of extra work. I was essentially doing two jobs, my own and the one Isabella was failing at. Some nights, I'd sit in my office until 2 a.m., surrounded by data charts and financial models, and wonder if it was worth it. The anger was a powerful fuel, but it was finite. Yet, every time my resolve wavered, I would just picture her smug, cruel smile on that rooftop, and the fire would return, burning hotter than before. This brought us to Phase 3, the execution. 3 months had passed since the party. The deadline for the final strategy presentation to the Sovereign's executive board was a week away. This was the big one. The signing of the multi-million-dollar contract was contingent on this presentation. Isabella, supremely confident, submitted her final report and presentation deck to me and David for review. It was exactly what I expected, a beautiful, glossy shell with a rotten core. The design was stunning, the language persuasive, but the data underpinning it all was a house of cards. The budget was off by a staggering 40%, wildly underestimating media buying costs. Her target demographic was based on outdated census data, and her growth projections were pure fantasy. It was a masterpiece of incompetence wrapped in a beautiful package. David, who always focused more on aesthetics than analytics, glanced through it and told her it looked fantastic. He didn't check the numbers. He trusted her. I did not make the same mistake. I didn't say a word. I just approved it. This was the moment I had been working towards. Letting her walk into that boardroom with a fundamentally flawed plan was the entire point. My work was done. My parallel project, the correct one, was complete, saved on a secure flash drive in my desk drawer. I spent the next few days in a state of strange, calm detachment. I watched Isabella practice her presentation, strutting around the office, basking in her impending glory. She was already taking a victory lap for a race she had no idea she was about to lose in spectacular fashion. She even had the audacity to pull me aside by the coffee machine. "Mia, I just wanted to thank you for being so supportive on this," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I know it must have been hard for you watching me lead this, but I'm glad to see you've moved past all that drama." She was trying to get a rise out of me, one last little twist of the knife. I just smiled, a real, genuine smile for the first time in months. "Of course, Isabella," I said. "You just focus on knocking it out of the park. I've got your back." The day of the presentation arrived. It was a crisp, clear autumn morning in Chicago. I wore my sharpest suit, a dark charcoal gray that felt like armor. I walked into our main boardroom, a cavernous space with a mahogany table and a panoramic view of Lake Michigan. On one side sat the Sovereign's CEO, CFO, and their technical team. On the other, David and a few of Vantage Point's senior partners, beaming with anticipation. And at the head of the table, setting up her laptop, was Isabella. She looked radiant, confident, and completely unaware that she was about to be professionally executed. She caught my eye as I took my seat and gave me a tiny, triumphant smirk. The show was about to begin. Isabella began her presentation, and I had to admit she was good. She was a performer. She walked the room with an easy confidence, her voice smooth and persuasive. She painted a dazzling picture of the Sovereign's future, using the beautiful, empty visuals she had so painstakingly created. The client executives were nodding, smiling. David was practically glowing with pride. For 20 minutes, she held them in the palm of her hand. I just sat there, my hands folded calmly on the table, my heart a steady, slow drum. I watched her click to slide 12, the one detailing the core financial projections. This was it. She breezed through it, throwing around impressive-sounding terms like synergistic growth and optimized ROI, but the numbers on the screen were a fiction. She concluded her presentation with a flourish, and the room broke into polite applause. "Wonderful work, Isabella," the Sovereign's CEO, a stern-looking man named Mr. Davenport, said. "Very impressive vision. Now my team has a few questions about the data, just for our due diligence." He gestured to a woman next to him, their lead financial analyst. This was the moment. The analyst cleared her throat. "Ms. Rossi, on slide 12, your projected media spend for the first quarter seems aggressive. Could you walk us through how you arrived at that $1.2 million figure?" Isabella's smile didn't falter. "Of course. That's based on a proprietary algorithm we use to model market penetration." She started to weave a web of jargon, but before she could get too far, I spoke up, my voice cutting through the air, calm and clear. "Actually, I can shed some light on that." All heads turned to me. David shot me a quizzical look. Isabella's eyes narrowed. "As the project overseer," I continued, addressing Mr. Davenport directly, "my role was to ensure the integrity of the back-end data. And I have to admit, I had the same question." I opened my own laptop, which was connected to the network. "Isabella, could you please open the source spreadsheet for that calculation? The one titled Q1 Media Spend Analysis?" A flicker of panic crossed Isabella's face. I don't have that handy right now, but I can assure you the numbers are solid." "That's all right," I said smoothly. "I do." With a few clicks, I projected the spreadsheet onto the massive screen behind her. It was her work, the one she had submitted. A mess of broken formulas, placeholder numbers, and cells linked to outdated reports. The room went dead silent. The client's analyst leaned forward, her eyes scanning the screen. Those aren't calculations," she said, bewildered. "Those are just hard-coded numbers." I didn't look at Isabella. I kept my focus on the client. "You are correct," I said. "There seems to have been a significant error in the data compilation for this report. For example, the cost per acquisition metric used here is from a 2018 campaign for a different client in a completely different sector." David's face had gone from proud to pale. The partners were shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Isabella was frozen, her confident smile melted away, replaced by a mask of sheer horror. Furthermore, I continued, my voice betraying no emotion, the demographic targets you saw in the presentation were based on census data that is nearly a decade old. I clicked again, showing them a side-by-side comparison of her data versus the current, accurate data. As you can see, the actual target demographic is 30% smaller and has a 50% lower average household income than what was presented, which completely changes the viability of the proposed strategy. It was a surgical vivisection. I wasn't attacking Isabella. I was presenting facts. I was calmly, methodically laying bare the shoddy, negligent work that she had tried to pass off as a multi-million-dollar strategy. Each new slide I brought up was another nail in her coffin. The flawed budget, the plagiarized concepts from old decks, the unrealistic timelines. I had documented everything. I had the proof. Finally, I turned to David and Mr. Davenport. It is clear that the report submitted by Ms. Rossi is not viable and does not meet Vantage Point's standards of quality. The potential budget overrun from these errors would be catastrophic for the client. Isabella finally broke. "She's lying," she stammered, her voice shrill. "She's been trying to sabotage me from the beginning?" David looked from her panicked face to my calm, collected one, and then to the damning evidence projected in 10-foot-high numbers on the wall. He saw the truth. He saw who had done the work and who had not. The game was over. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Mr. Davenport clearing his throat. "Well," he said, his voice dangerously low, "this has been illuminating." He looked at David, his expression unreadable but clearly furious. "We were prepared to sign a 3-year, 8-figure contract today. Based on that," he gestured dismissively at Isabella's presentation, "we are prepared to walk." Panic flashed in David's eyes. The loss of the sovereign account would be a disaster for the firm, and for him personally. He had to salvage this right now. "Mr. Davenport, please," David said, standing up. "This is an unacceptable failure on our part. A failure of oversight. It is clear Ms. Rossi was not prepared to lead a project of this magnitude." He didn't even look at Isabella as he threw her under the bus. "However, it is also clear," he continued, turning his gaze to me, "that Ms. Sterling not only understands the data, but has a deep and thorough grasp of your actual needs. The errors were caught because she did the work." He looked back at the client. "Give us a chance to make this right. Vantage Point will absorb the cost of the initial strategy phase. We will restructure the team, effective immediately. Mia Sterling will be the new account director for Sovereign. She will have full autonomy to build her team and execute her vision. The one I know she has already prepared." It was a gamble, but it was his only move. Mr. Davenport considered it for a long moment, his eyes fixed on me. He was assessing me, judging if I had what it took to clean up this mess. I met his gaze without flinching. "I have a corrected proposal ready for your review," I said calmly, "based on accurate data and a viable, results-driven strategy. We can walk through it now if you'd like." Another long silence. Then a slow nod. "Show us." The sigh of relief from the Vantage Point partners was audible. David shot me a look of profound gratitude. In that moment, I had saved him. I had saved the account, and I had sealed my victory. The rest of the meeting was a blur. I presented my real strategy, the one I had painstakingly built in the dead of night. It was flawless. The data was solid, the ideas were innovative but practical, the budget was realistic. By the end, the clients weren't just salvaged. They were genuinely excited. The contract was back on the table. As the clients were packing up, David walked over to me. "Mia, I don't know what to say. You saved us today. I clearly misjudged things. The account director role for this team is yours. Whatever you need, you've got it." Then he turned to where Isabella was still sitting, pale and numb, staring blankly at the mahogany table. His voice turned to ice. "Isabella." "My office. Now." I packed up my laptop, my movements slow and deliberate. I didn't watch her leave. I didn't need to. I had won. The pity promotion was dead and buried, and from its ashes, something much stronger had risen. The next morning, an official company-wide email went out. It announced the successful acquisition of the Sovereign account and the immediate restructuring of the new division. I was named account director, and as part of the new organizational chart, Isabella Rossi, former senior analyst, was now listed as a junior project coordinator, reporting directly to me. A week later, I was settling into my new office. It was a proper corner office this time, with 2 walls of floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a stunning view of Millennium Park and the lake beyond. My old glass fishbowl was now occupied by a new hire. The power shift was palpable. People in the hallways met my eye. My team, the one I was now truly leading, looked at me with respect, not pity. They had all been in that boardroom. They had seen what happened. There were no more whispers, no more awkward glances. There was only the quiet hum of work being done. There was a soft knock on my open door. It was Isabella. She looked smaller, diminished. Her designer suit was gone, replaced by a drab conservative blouse. Her usual vibrant confidence had been extinguished, leaving behind a hollowed-out shell. She wasn't smiling. She clutched a draft of a weekly status report to her chest like a shield. "The Sovereign Logistics Summary," she mumbled, avoiding my gaze. "You asked for it by noon." She held it out to me. I didn't take it immediately. I just leaned back in my new leather chair and looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since the presentation. The venomous, triumphant woman from the rooftop party was gone. In her place was a defeated employee, stripped of her status and her power, forced to serve the very person she tried to destroy. I had done it. I had taken her insults, her sabotage, and her cruelty, and I had systematically converted them into fuel for my own ascent. I had not only cleared my name, I had taken her place in the hierarchy, and then some. She looked at me, waiting for an order, and in the chilling quiet of my new office, I finally understood the difference between pity and power. The end.